can't describe it. You gotta go and see it. I think that's one of a few things that I talk with the friends that you cannot. Yeah, you can see it in media and social network how it looks from drones and different pictures, but until you don't feel it, until you don't go in there and feel those goosebumps and how everything, the whole arena is shaking, you can't replicate that.
The atmosphere and the passion and the love of everybody in that arena. When 20,000 people are standing and chanting for their team, and that's the game that people talk about weeks ahead of the match and weeks after that. Like, it's eternal derby, and it's just out of this world.
I napred Partizan. Idemo.
Boom. That is two Serbians, Darko Rajakovic, the Toronto Raptors head coach, and Bogdan Bogdanovic, the Atlanta Hawks forward guard for now. Anyway, talking about the eternal derby between Partizan Belgrade and Red Star Belgrade, which is on today in the EuroLeague. And yes, unfortunately, Bogey's going to feature a little bit today because it appears his days in Toronto are up. Unfortunately, very, very sad. But things are going to happen. But this is the Basketball Passport Pod. I am Leigh Ellis, joined by Lakers Lounge insider Anthony Irwin. How you doing there, man?
Doing good, man. I always kind of get a real kick out of when you ask players about their native land and the basketball being played in their native land, right? Because everybody is so kind of bored with the typical, like, well, what did you think about that play?
Yeah.
What did you think about this? What did you think about this call? Or like the infamous, like, tell me about blah, 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 or talk about blah, blah, blah. and as soon as you ask, like, hey, let's leave that stuff behind.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Belgrade Derby. And he just immediately, you just see in his eyes, Yes, let's actually do that. That sounds amazing. And
it invokes a different reaction,
incredible.
For sure. Same with Darko Rajakovic there, the Raptors coach. I mean, he's a very personable guy anyway. But when you talk about, something closer to their heart in terms of their country, because Rajakovic is not from Belgrade, but he did spend some time at Red Star, in fact, at their youth team. But again, it does just sort of bring out a different emotion. And that was only, I think, about 45 seconds. I had about 3.5 minutes. But again, for social media, you got to really just like shove everything in so people watch it. But great stuff there from both those guys. So, this is our Friday show, actually, Basketball Passport, where we take a little bit of a look around the world of basketball. Although today, we're actually probably going to spend a little bit more time in the NBA because there's been quite a bit of news. We've got the All-Star reserves announced last night. We've got a ton of trade rumors because the trade deadline is up on Thursday, I believe it is, on the 7th. And then Adam Silver also floated a different idea about maybe shortening the length of games. He said he's a fan of 10-minute quarters, so we'll get to that and then chat a little again about the Belgrade Derby between Partizan and Red Star that goes this afternoon in Belgrade. It's going to be a huge, huge game. So let's start, I guess, with the news that dropped last night. We had the All-Star reserves announced. And as always, there's a few snubs and a few people upset and a few people saying, hey, this guy should be in, this guy should be out. I'll start with the West and we'll go through them there. We've got Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis, James Harden back in the All-Star game, Jaren Jackson Jr., Alperen Şengün from Turkey, Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Victor Wembanyama. First thoughts there. What do you think about all those players, firstly, who are in, and we'll get to the snubs a little bit after that.
That is a huge team. Like, that is a huge side. Now, they aren't all going to be playing on the same side because they're, breaking the teams up into 4 and they're doing the whole like tournament thing or whatever. But like, you look at that team, it kind of reminds me of the old Western Conference All-Star teams when you had KG and Dirk and Shaq and Duncan and they were just like these monstrous teams, right? And even like the small, quote unquote, small guys on that team was like Kobe and like, I guess you would have Nash out there. So that would kind of bring down the average height or whatever. But that that side is monstrous. That is a
Yeah.
huge team. Also kind of slow. I understand why they would put somebody like Şengün in there. I don't think he's Houston's best player. So like personally, I would have put Thompson in there. If you have to include, and I get why you have to, because Houston's having such a great season.
Yeah.
That would be like my only quote unquote tweak. But everybody there, like when you only have 12 guys on each side, everybody there is going to be incredibly deserving. And the first couple of people left off of there are going to be pretty wronged or feel pretty wronged.
Yeah, I mean that's always the debate. No matter how big you make the rosters, because people are like make them 15. Well, then you're just still going to
And the
get
16th
snubs.
person.
Yeah, exactly. But it always, for me, again, it's like what sort of value do you put here? Because Wembanyama, I mean, obviously he's been fantastic, but does the record count? James Harden, I'll have to say, I'm surprised he's back in the All-Star game simply because he's just not loved all that much. But he gets the recognition here playing on the Clippers, who have had, pretty decent season, and he has been good, but it just sort of felt like when it comes down to it, people look at Harden and just think, I don't enjoy his game. He's bounced around. He's been, a bit of a locker
cantankerous.
Room. Exactly. Yeah. And those things usually, cost you, but instead in this case, he's back in there. Şengün's an interesting one because I think a lot of people, do like him. I saw him actually here with the Rockets were here in Atlanta the other night, and he played really well. A nice young kid. And yes, I agree. I think the Rockets, considering the season they have, they deserve a representative. Is it Amen Thompson, Jalen Green? They've got lots of good players, but not that one just total sort of
Star.
dominant. Yeah. But I'm glad to see him there, and Jaren Jackson Jr. as well. I mean, Ja Morant, I think, just missed too many games. I think he's perfect for a game like this, but he's just missed too many games. And the Grizzlies have been really good. They actually last night had their crazy game. Did you see the end of that game with the Rockets and the timeout there at all last night?
Yeah, the timeout. Yeah, timeout gate.
Yeah.
I liked how like the referees were like, you know what, we screwed this up. Go ahead and yell at us as much as you possibly.
Yeah.
Like really get it out, Taylor Jenkins. We'll look the other way.
Yeah, but I mean, he was kind of right. I tried to look back at it, and they were on a breakaway. Like I don't know exactly how it happened, but why you would think they would want a timeout in that situation is kind of crazy. So, they get away with it anyway, so there's no harm done. But pretty wild stuff there. So Anthony Davis, I mean, he was obviously I think pretty much a lock on everyone's team. And the Lakers there get the 2 reps. I imagine you're pretty happy with that.
53rd time that they have had multiple All-Stars, the Lakers. Right. We as Lakers fans are pretty damn spoiled. Like it's crazy enough to have like 53 times or whatever a star in the game, but to be represented so thoroughly, it speaks to obviously the brand that is associated with the Lakers being I maintain the marquee franchise in the sport, but then also the caliber of players that we've been able to watch. Go through the years. You have Shaq, Kobe, Kareem, Magic. Now you have LeBron, AD. And we'll see where things go from here. But that 53 times, I don't know how many times the game has actually been played, and I would say the vast majority of them, there have been at least 2 Lakers. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Victor Wembanyama back in the All-Star game for the San Antonio Spurs is quite remarkable too, because from like 71 or 72, they had a representative in almost every game up until like 2018, 2019 with LaMarcus Aldridge. DeJounte Murray made it as I think he was an injury replacement a few years ago. But they've had, I think, in terms of historically, a representative more than any other team in terms of just one at least per year. And now that with Victor Wembanyama, they're about to start another streak that could go for 20 years just by himself, But interesting there. So, okay, let's have a listen, a little bit of a chat about then who you think could have or perhaps should have made it on the West. I know there's a couple of names being thrown around. I think Sabonis is probably the biggest one. I had Kyrie Irving there. Norm Powell's a very interesting one as well. He's been great for the Clippers. And you see Harden make it and you're like, well, you're definitely not going to get two. Yeah. Does he deserve to be in there over James Harden? But I think it comes down ultimately to Sabonis and Kyrie Irving. And Sabonis is having just an incredible season. And you sort of think if there's a big that he should be in there ahead of, it would probably be Şengün. But I guess the voters chose Şengün.
Yeah, I mean, you got to reward the winning, and I think Şengün and Sabonis have similar playing styles, so they kind of flip the coin there. And then, yeah, I think Kyrie is probably the biggest snub. He would be the 13th guy in the conference, I would say. The Mavericks have basically been playing without Luka for 3/4 of the season to this point. They just haven't had him basically at all, and have somehow remained in the thick of it when it comes to at least the play-in. And Kyrie Irving, I think, is not just responsible like in terms of the basketball that he's played, but I also want to give a lot of credit to him for the maturity that he's shown throughout all of this. Not a peep, about anything but the basketball here for him. He has not been at all the headache that many around the league he would be, or else more teams would have been interested in trading for him. I know the Lakers kicked the tires on that situation and then eventually decided that the potential headache would not be worth it. To his credit, he has handled being in Dallas really well. He has played, great basketball. And also, I think, very importantly, his game lends itself really well to the All-Star game and to the exhibition and the notion of this being played for the fans. If we were to remove everything else, I would absolutely rather watch Kyrie Irving play over Alperen Şengün in this game. Power forward centers don't normally look all that great here. And that's not to say that like Şengün isn't a good player. That's completely besides the point. It's just that those kinds of bigs, like even Jokic never really cares much, but like even he doesn't look all that great in this kind of a game because he just kind of like loafs up and down the court. The guards wind up having the ball more than anybody. Yeah. And then they get there like 7 minutes in and then they get out of there. If that's what it's going to look like with Şengün, I'd rather watch Kyrie Irving play.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. The visuals for me, Kyrie is deserving, and he's made for a game like this. And I would compare him to Harden in that sense. Like Harden has got a very unpleasant game to watch. He doesn't have a fun game, and he doesn't look like he enjoys himself. Whereas Kyrie's looked like sometimes he's a globetrotter out there. When the ball trickles along the ground, he's slipping, he's sliding, and he goes up with either hand and he hits the step back threes and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think Kyrie, honestly, I mean, it's been smooth sailing this season for him in Dallas. Shockingly, because when they made the trade for him and then they re-signed him, it was like, you sort of had to re-sign him because you traded a lot to get him. But everybody knew the risk of like at some point, it's like the Jimmy Butler, it's like he's going to sort of turn on the franchise and things are going to go crazy. But that has not happened. And he's been really good, especially as you mentioned, without Doncic there, he's had to do carry more of the workload. But there's not even been a peep from him about anything, to maybe destabilize that team. Mavericks haven't had a great season. They're still frigging things out, but it's one of those teams that I'm like, if Luka does come back, and maybe this is actually not a bad thing for him to get a little bit of rest here now and ready for the stretch run. We saw what they did in the playoffs last year. They beat the Timberwolves, they beat the Thunder, two teams that, have obviously got their sights set on going further this season. But I think with Klay Thompson out there as well, he had the huge 7 threes in a quarter the other night. I mean, the Mavericks are one of those teams. It's like if things sort of fall their way, they could be quite a threat in the West. And so they have no representatives at all. And for the team that finished second last season in the playoffs, in the finals, bit of a surprise.
First in the conference.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. they and by the way, like you're talking about, they profile as a team that could very easily get right back to there, right? If they get healthy,
Yep.
and they hit the ground running when guys get healthy, or if guys get healthy. Now, sometimes this just happens. Like ask Memphis last year, you just have the season from hell, and your injuries never really turn around. And sometimes that's the case. But if that isn't the case here with the Mavericks, and they do get healthy, and they might play like OKC or Houston or Memphis, in that, if those, by the way, like again, this, I don't mean this as any kind of offense to these teams. OKC, Houston, Memphis, they're all pretty young. They're all very young teams. They're all pretty unproven. And if like the Warriors make a trade, we just saw the Warriors knock off the Thunder the other night. If the Lakers make a trade, we just saw the Lakers beat the Celtics the other night. And if the Mavericks get healthy, and they have profiled, even while not being all that healthy, as a really good team, the Western Conference is probably going to be another like crazy upset ground for upsets again. And if there are all of those upsets, and then Dallas does get to the Western Conference, it'll look kind of dumb when Kyrie has had a really good season and they didn't have any representation at the All-Star game, despite 2 straight potential trips to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah. Okay, so before we move to the East, if there is an injury replacement, who would you think is number 1 on that roster for the West?
Has to be Kyrie. It has to be Kyrie.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if it's like, see, if there's an injury, I would kind of like for them to take position into account. Like if it's a big that gets hurt, okay, then Sabonis, you can get in there. If it's a guard that gets hurt, okay, Kyrie, you can get in there. But overall, like it's just Kyrie in an all-star game is so electric.
Yeah.
He is so much fun. Like you said, he really understands the assignment in that spot. You have this tournament set up where he'll spend more time on the ball, it looks like, right? Because you'll have more guys. You won't have, like in past years, you'll have guys who play like 5 minutes in the game. I don't think you'll have as much of that in this tournament setup. So like it becomes harder to hide guys who don't really care to be there or not. So I'd rather have somebody there who like really does want to not just be there for the honor of being an all-star, but also wants to be there for the sake of the competition and the exhibition game.
Yeah, that's right. It will be interesting because I think Sabonis is probably going to get it, but it'll be him or Kyrie. But anyway, maybe that won't be a decision Adam Silver have to make. On the Eastern Conference side, these are the reserves: Jaylen Brown, Pascal Siakam, Darius Garland, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Damian Lillard, and Tyler Hero gets in there from the Miami Heat. I think for me, Tyler Hero is probably the one that's caused the most people to sort of be somewhat, upset or surprised maybe that he made it. What do you think of these reserves here for the East?
So small. They're so like, it really reminds me of those old East and West setups where, again, you would have like in the West, you have all those great power forwards and the centers and all that stuff. And in the East, it would be like Allen Iverson and this like 5'8" and under crew.
Yeah.
Like this is a very, now look, again, all of these guys incredibly deserving of being there. Even Hero with everything going on in Miami. And I know making the playoffs in the Eastern Conference is the kind of thing that like, you just have to avoid unmitigated disaster. And you're like a 8 seed. I think I saw somewhere that like the 4 or 5 seed in the East is like the 12 seed in the West right now. So like, I guess you have to take that into account, but Hero, despite all of the Jimmy Butler stuff, despite all of the nonsense that has been taking place there in Miami, is having like arguably the best shooting season in the sport, and has kept that ship afloat. And I also saw, I don't know if you saw the clip of him finding out he's an all-star. Really cool clip there. I don't know if he was wearing shorts or pants. I don't know, but it was still like a really cool moment there. I'm happy for Hero. I'm glad he gets that recognition, and I do think like it's kind of like a dunk contest, right? Where The difficulty is taken into account on the final score. The difficulty of keeping this Miami Heat team going in the right direction with Jimmy Butler being as ridiculous as he's been all year. I definitely think Hero deserves to be there.
Well, and Hero as well deserves credit for his maturity as well, because basically the Heat traded him for Lillard. They were like, Hero, and then we'll figure out the rest. And that didn't happen. Now he and Lillard will be teammates. Well, possibly anyway. They're here for the game. But, again, for a young guy, I remember at the time, Hero actually basically said, like, hey, man, I get it. It's a business. It's Lillard. Your name's out there. It's somewhat flattering to be included in a trade for a guy like him. And it didn't happen. But instead of maybe pouting or trying to, figure his way out of Miami, he responds and is now an all-star. And, imagine how happy Pat Riley is right now, just seeing that, for everything that's going on, as you mentioned there with Jimmy behind the scenes, and Tyler Hero's going to the all-star game. So they're going to have representation. And yeah, he's having a great season. It just, for me, I guess when I look at those reserves, Cade Cunningham, I thought he was a lock. I had a really cool conversation with him last week here in Atlanta when he was here. And, I went into the locker room after the game and I was just like, oh, hey, how you doing, man? No one else was talking to him. So I started chatting to him about his game. I said, where's the growth come from? And he talked about, working with his development coaches and all that team. And he got himself healthy. I think that's the biggest reason for the improvement. And at the end of it, I said to him, hey, listen, man, I don't have a vote, but if I did, you'd be an all-star. And he gave me a nice little dap up there. And I was like, man, that's cool. So,
well, now you're definitely an all-star.
Definitely.
Now I got to work on getting a vote.
Yeah. But, so great to see him in there. Pascal Siakam, I'm only surprised because the Pacers had such a terrible start to the season. I know they've gotten it together recently, but it felt like they had really fallen off the radar, especially Tyrese Halliburton, to the point where it's like, man, was last year just an anomaly that they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals? Mobley, Garland, no complaints at all there for the Cavs. They deserve a couple. Jaylen Brown, we knew he was a lock. So who am I forgetting there? Oh, no, I've mentioned everyone else. Yeah. So now getting to the, possible snubs or potential snubs, the biggest one I think coming out of the East here has been the local for me here, Trae Young, he's having a really good season, leading the league in assists. But the Hawks are just, their season's starting to slip away from them a bit. Jalen Johnson's out for the rest of the year. We'll get to the Bogdanovic trade rumors soon here. But I wonder, for you not being in Atlanta, did you think Trae Young was going to make it? Do you think he deserved to make it? Do you think it's just one of those situations? It's like the Hawks get overlooked and therefore even the season Trae's having is also something that gets overlooked?
If he would have been in, I would have got it. I think he's now the first player ever to have multiple 20-point, 10+ assist seasons and not make the All-Stars in either of those seasons.
Yeah.
His rep isn't the best from what I've been able to gather over the years. You think about like what the game is supposed to be. And it's supposed to be this exhibition for the fans. And Trae Young, like, he's the kind of guy who loves, working off of the crowd and bringing the crowd into it and understanding that moment and really competing and going at guys. So I would have liked to seen him on the team, but I also kind of struggle to figure out who I would take off of the team to put him on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that's the toughest part here, right? And Shaq said last night that it's a broken system, and he went on and on and on about how like Trae Young has the numbers, he's putting up the numbers to be able to go out and do that, and like wins be damned. I feel like we're kind of arbitrary when it comes to making that point, wins be damned and all of that. But where I do think, especially if you're doing the whole tournament thing and you're doing 4 teams and all of this stuff, I'd rather have a couple extra NBA all-stars on it than like have, they're doing like a whatever team wins in like the rookie thing.
Yeah.
Moves on and plays.
Yeah.
And No.
Yeah,
Like, no, like if you're going to do that, just have a few extra all-stars on there and
Yeah.
make the tournament all the more fun.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that I think sometimes just Atlanta just gets overlooked. I think because it's all about timing. Well, not all about time, but I think timing plays a role in it because toward the end of December, the Hawks rattled off 6 in a row and started to look really, really good. But right now, they're on a real slide. And whenever these votes came in, which were probably in the last 2 weeks or so, that the Hawks have dropped 7 straight, and the wheels are starting to fall off a little bit. Again, bodies are down. It feels like there's going to be some real moves here to be made before Thursday, and it's almost like the Hawks are sort of like, oh, man, we're not, we're in that sort of no man's land, like not really a contender this season. Got some good young pieces. The future is bright, but it's also like what they have right now is not enough to compete. Now, again, if guys are healthy, we saw it at their best. When they had everybody, they were good. Jalen Johnson, if you'd asked me 6 weeks ago, I would have said Jalen Johnson's a near lock for the All-Star game. He's having such a great season, 20-10-5, and had a huge impact on those Hawks winning games, and he's playing defense, he was doing everything. And Trae Young, just quickly, I remember when you said that, it's once you get a reputation as a bad defender, it's almost impossible to shake that. And Trae wasn't a great defender in his early days, but in the last few weeks especially, but a lot this season, he's really putting his body on the line and standing strong and doing everything he can. He's undersized, he's small, so he's he's always going to get sort of exploited somewhat, but the effort is there. And there's been progress made. But again, it doesn't really matter. People are like, nope, you were a bad defender 5 years ago when you were 20 in your second season. That's carrying you all the way through. So yeah. I think that's,
he doesn't really look like a defender. And I think, it's difficult for people to wrap their brains around. Like Steph got this a long time.
Yes.
Where now Steph is a lot bigger than Trae. I think he's, I think Steph is like 6'3" almost.
Yeah, 6'3", yeah.
Yeah, and like a long 6'3", and now he's even kind of like a beefy 6'3". So it became a little easier to see him as like a league average defender, even when he was like a little above league average at his position. Trae is still really small. His bad defensive moments are really, really loud. And I think people kind of like you're talking about, like really kind of grasp onto that narrative, especially while Atlanta doesn't do very much winning. You're looking for reasons for that. And it always kind of starts with the star, unfortunately.
Yeah. And their defense hasn't been great either this season. That's one of the areas. But, again, the most recent game here in Atlanta, I was at on whatever night that was, Monday or Tuesday against the Rockets. A couple of times when there was a mismatch and guys try to take him in the post. Well, Trae stands his ground now as best he can. And that to me is the progress. It's like, all right, he knows that teams are still going to try to exploit him. They can shoot over him because he can't change his height, but at least he can dig in and try to not just get steamrolled under the paint. And he did that a couple of times. But again, those sorts of things are not highlights. They don't go viral. No one cares. No one sees them. But when you are down at games, you notice those things. And the Dyson Daniels impact and effect on the Hawks has been there. Guys have talked about it. Bogdanovic talked about it. Trae's talked about it. Jalen talked about it. Like when you see a guy out there playing defense and getting a lot of steals and putting his body in, it becomes contagious where other guys do it. And I've noticed that from Trae this season. And also talking about Kyrie Irving like we did, Trae last season and in the off season, it was like the Hawks are trying to trade him, but no one wants him. He could have easily gone the sort of Jimmy Butler route of like, all right, well, if you guys don't want me, I want out, and I'm going to make as much noise as I can until I get a trade somewhere. But he hasn't been like that. Instead, he's responded with his, arguably his most efficient season, and just his best season. He's been good. He hasn't been out there, desperate to try to score, just to keep his numbers up. I mean, they didn't do something great against the Raptors on Saturday when his assist streak came to an end. But other than that, he's been a really good teammate and a really good player in that locker room. And so, these are the sorts of things that don't really come into it when teams and coaches or the assistant coaches, whoever's making those votes, they don't notice and they don't see it. And again, the winning hasn't helped. I mean, the Hawks have been hovering at or below 500 for a lot of the season. So they haven't really had a long, strong point of the season, despite wins in Boston twice, in Cleveland, New York, Milwaukee early on. But it was almost like those happened so early into the season, they've been forgotten, so that's
I
the
also
way
think like if Johnson didn't get hurt, he'd be an all-star.
Oh, for
right?
sure. For sure.
So
he was on pace for that.
I was actually kind of surprised that he wasn't named anyway, for rewarding him for the season that he had.
Yeah.
You name him and then you like automatically replace him kind of a thing.
Well,
because that helps guys like contractually.
Yeah, it does. He's just been out though for so long now, in and out, and now he's out for the season. So
yeah,
I think that just cost him that it just feels like he hasn't been around for for a while. But he was on pace for sure. And look, he's young. He got the big contract. He's 23. The Hawks this season, like I say, they're not going to go far this season. But if those young players continue to, show what they've got, the outlook is bright. Okay, before we move on, if there is an East replacement, who are you going with?
I'd probably go Trey.
Yeah.
I would probably go Trey, again, for the same reasons with as before with Kyrie. It's too bad Orlando doesn't have any representation here. I think eventually they're going to make some noise in the playoffs. And, it's tough because Paolo has missed so much time and Franz has missed so much time. But it's kind of a bummer that we aren't going to have any Orlando representation there. Yeah. I think it's probably still they've missed too much time to be, alternatives in case somebody gets hurt or isn't able to play.
Yeah.
The East, I mean, again, it's not East versus West anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But this East side needs some size.
Yeah.
They are very small. But like again, they aren't playing against the West, so it doesn't really matter.
No. I think it's down to I think Trey's obviously in with probably the best shot in the East. I mean, Tyrese Maxey, I think part of the reason the Sixers are still somehow alive
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets in, but they've had obviously a bad season. And then LaMelo Ball, we know he was leading the votes there, but he's just always injured, and
again.
And the Hornets, have been.
Did you see how he got hurt?
This time? No, I don't think I did. No.
He hit a three. It was against the Lakers. He hit a three and was like, they were down by like 10 and he's doing like all this stuff. He's like going back on defense. Vanderbilt, obviously not on purpose, but Vanderbilt was trying to get down the court and maybe leak out and get an easy bucket because LaMelo's going through his whole, like doing YMCA every time he makes a 3-pointer. And like, he doesn't, Vando realizes that he's not going to get the ball coming, so he kind of slows up. And then LaMelo is still backtrotting on defense, and he steps on Vando's heel, turns his ankle, and goes down. So I'm not making fun of like LaMelo for going down or whatever, but like of the ways to sprain an ankle, that is A, the most LaMelo Ball way.
Yeah.
And B, about as like embarrassing as it gets.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. He is great to watch and all those things we talked about earlier, but there also has to be at least some criteria of like, you got to be at least somewhat healthy, and your team's got to be at least double digits wins or something. I don't know. I mean, it's a tough spot because he's fun to watch and, he brings some color to the All-Star game, but didn't really have him in there as making it. Okay, moving on because, as I mentioned, we've got the trade deadline coming up on the 7th, on Thursday, and there's quite a bit of news going around. I think the biggest one, it's obviously going to be Jimmy Butler or De'Aaron Fox, but it certainly seems like De'Aaron Fox is going to be on the move, and if he gets his way, he's going to the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I don't know if you've had a chance to sort of look into how this could happen, but what do you think on the surface of Fox, who's I believe he's from Houston. His wife, I think, is from San Antonio. So he's got the Texas ties there. But I think there's another reason why he wants to go to San Antonio as well. And
it's like, you don't think it's a 7'6" alien?
It's at that point where he's like, man, I just can't sort of build. I've got to go to where the best player in the world is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. get me to San Antonio. What do you think the chances of this happening are?
Man, I want to say they're high because stars in their prime get their way, and it's now so loud. I saw somebody tweet out, I think it's I think at Fear the Brown on Twitter tweeted out that this is the exact day, or the 28th is when, we got the report that the Kings would be wise to trade De'Aaron Fox. That was the exact day that Rich Paul told the Pelicans that they would be wise to trade Anthony Davis before they eventually did. So Clutch is doing Clutch things, and they typically tend to get their way. I'm really curious, though, because the Spurs are a historically very conservative team. And this isn't the kind of move that they typically make. If they get their star, it's usually through the draft or a trade on draft day for somebody that nobody thought was a trade or was a star quite yet, like Kawhi,
yeah.
Leonard was. In this case, so I think they got to go for it. Like, I really do. You have Wemby on his rookie deal still. He's the best value in the sport by a long shot. And you have Devin Vassell's contract that fits quite nicely if you send him out and bring in De'Aaron Fox. And now you have a backcourt of De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle moving forward. That is such a cool backcourt. Castle's like this physical guy who has some shake to him. Going to be a really good defender here moving forward. He's competing in the dunk contest.
Yeah.
He had a great dunk the other day where he was like getting hand checked the whole way to the basket. And he just like randomly decides, I'm going to dunk now, and shakes off the defender, throws a dunk like a tomahawk dunk behind his head. It was the craziest thing. And you pair Wemby with a defense piercing point guard who has done some winning here and there. I really love the fit. If I were the Spurs, I would totally go for it. Me saying this as like a fan of another Western Conference team, I'm really hoping that they remain conservative here and they don't do this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because if you are the Kings, you would say, well, give us Castle in return. But the Spurs won't do that.
No.
They wouldn't allow him to go. So it's just a matter of whether or not they can find all the pieces there. But, if you are the Kings, and you've reached that point where he's out, he wants to leave, then you've got to try to maximize whatever return you can get. And like next to Chris Paul, I mean, you basically, if you're the Spurs, you'd be like, okay, we want him to learn from Chris Paul as well, because Fox is a good point guard, but he's not in the caliber of Chris Paul. But if that fit going forward could be what it's been so far with Paul and Wembanyama, I mean, then the Spurs are just going to be unstoppable here in a couple of years' time. But
yeah,
you're right, though, about the Spurs. It feels like they're sort of sitting back going, well, we know we can make this deal if we want, but we're also in a position of strength because Fox has a 1 year left, I believe, on his deal. Going into next season, so then they can afford to wait if they choose to and make this deal in the off season or sometime next season. But the value that the Kings can get back on him obviously decreases if they don't get anything done here on Thursday. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, the other big one, Jimmy Butler. I don't know who you sort of read and believe or what you want to see, but it feels like something will get done, I think, before the deadline. It's just a matter of where he goes and who's in return. Apparently, he wants to go to the Phoenix Suns. That's, I think, the strongest connection out there. It's just whether or not Bradley Beal is prepared to waive that no-trade clause and go somewhere, to Miami potentially, or even rerouted somewhere else. But do you think Jimmy Butler will get his wish and will be on a different team in the next few days?
I think he'll get his wish and he'll be on a different team. I don't think he'll be in Phoenix though, because they tried to split up that one first rounder into 3 lesser first rounders to hopefully facilitate sending Bradley Beal somewhere else, because Miami doesn't want Bradley Beal. The thing there is, like, Memphis is still debating whether or not they should trade for Jimmy Butler, even if he is unhappy, with being in Memphis. If I were Memphis and I know going into the relationship he wouldn't be unhappy, I wouldn't do it because we see what an unhappy Jimmy Butler looks like. So that does kind of limit his market a little bit. But there, I guess, is some, Mark Stein and Jake Fisher, who do great work together for Substack. Those guys reported that apparently the Pelicans are potentially interested. That would be interesting to see, like, Brandon Ingram go to Miami, I think, in that case. The team lead that I really, really, really think should consider it is Denver.
Yeah.
And send out Michael Porter Jr. He's always been a Florida man anyway. And I think, with Porter, his big thing is, especially this season, he really struggles with physicality. And in the postseason, that, there are some postseason moments where he looks incredible, but then there are also some postseason moments where he completely disappears. You can't have a guy on a max contract who disappears in the postseason. So now Butler would put a further strain on Denver's already kind of tough shooting situation. They have struggled spacing the floor all year, but Jokic tends to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And I really think, like, of all of the teams that could trade for him, that's the one that I think is the most interesting. And then, like, the Warriors are kind of thinking about it. I guess there's a rumor that Steph is concerned about fit and that Steve Kerr is a little concerned about the fit. They need talent, and I think, it's that age-old debate, culture versus talent. And I think they need a talent injection. They have plenty of culture. And you always have Draymond there to knock somebody out if Jimmy Butler is acting up. So where would you like to see him go?
Oh, well, the Denver one's the most interesting because I think if you look at what Westbrook has, what's happened with him this season, I think what you said there is that Jokic figures out a way to optimize whoever is there. The shooting is a problem, I think, because I think Jokic is at his most dangerous when there are just like threats everywhere. And Jimmy doesn't really offer you that, but he offers you a different look, a more toughness than Porter defensively. The ability to show as well. He can step up in game. The only question I guess there is Butler, would he be happy, not being the number one guy? And can he just come into a situation with a 3-time MVP, a champ, and sort of be like, well, hang on, I want to be the one who calls the shots here. I think Jokic is kind of like, listen, man, whoever I play with, I'm passing it to them. I'm just going to be fine with. It's just whether or not Jimmy Butler, with that $52 million option for next season, is something the Nuggets are prepared to ride out. But it feels like for them, they need a bit of a shake-up too. I believe in continuity. I think continuity is very, very important. But it just sort of feels like, they, after what happened last season and then this season, it's like, it doesn't seem like they are actually, it feels like they need something. They need an injection. So I don't know where he's going to go. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see which team he goes through. The Warriors have been, I think there's talk about Wiggins and one of the younger guys as well for the Heat, which I can see them making that deal. I know Wiggins, based on what happened in Minnesota, Jimmy goes to Golden State, he'll want to be going the other way, I think. So,
yeah, probably. I think that's probably a good call.
So
there's actually, with your Atlanta Hawks, I'm really kind of curious what they do because they were having a really fun season. I would say they were well ahead of schedule. They weren't supposed to be good this year, but had Johnson remained healthy, they're easily a playoff, at the very least, play-in team. And I'm really kind of curious if they're going to try to keep this thing afloat. I know Atlanta's ownership loves the idea of some playoff revenue if they can get it. And they do have some expiring contracts that they could send out to maybe, prop this window open even while they don't have Jalen Johnson. There's some buzz potentially about Brandon Ingram going to Atlanta. And then as part of like a bigger deal, maybe like, Capella going somewhere, and then Bogey. I know that the Lakers, I guess, are kicking the tires on him. So, what would you think about the Hawks swinging for the playoffs even without Johnson.
Yeah, well, so it's funny because last week when I was down there at the game, and I've been to every Hawks game this season, and I don't really go fishing for information, but you just actually hear things,
Oh yeah.
And I heard last week something about, well, I'm trying to sort of not, I'm trying to sort of protect it somewhat, but someone said, hey, if this happens, then expect this to happen. And I didn't sort of take too much out of it. And then, Bogdanovic played, I think his last game was on Friday, and he hasn't been with the team since. And Capella wasn't with the team either last night in Cleveland. So quite clearly, that's a sign of like, we don't want these guys to potentially injure themselves and scupper a deal. So it tells me that a deal is in the works. Exactly who and which one, not sure. But the one that would make sense for the Hawks would be if they can get Nurkic as a big, if Bogdanovic is going to the Suns. Apparently there's some interest there from both teams to make that happen. Nurkic has basically got no relationship with Budenholzer. He's a big. If Capella's out, which he has been, it's like it's only on Okongwu and Larry Nance Jr. And Larry Nance is really not a 5. He's a 4.5. He's a great guy. He's a great locker room person to have there, but he's not really a big. And so it makes sense. It's like, well, listen, we need to make some changes here too. I think Nurkic is not a bad player. He's tough. He's had a few injuries, but he can stretch the floor as well. So that one would make sense if you want to just sort of get a new big in there. But unfortunately, definitely Bogdanovic not being around the team is a signal that this is coming to end, whether it's in the next few days or at the end of the season. Bogey has had a tough season, though. He's not shooting the ball well. His points are down. His production is down. He has not been able to really get a good stretch of games going either. He's been injured so much. And it feels like, I think he's been here 5 seasons now as well. I think it feels like for him, he wants a fresh start. And there's talk about the Mavericks, apparently pairing him and Luka together. I don't mind that matchup. The Lakers, I think, would be very wise to see if they can get him as well. I think if you get a healthy, motivated, rejuvenated Bogey, he's a steal. He is a steal. He's got 2 years left on his deal after this one, team option for that second year as well. So if you can get him, but right now his trade value, I think, is pretty low because, again, the injuries, the production, the shooting, it's just not been there for him this season. So, the Hawks are basically like, all right, what offers you got there? But I don't think they're going to get tons of good stuff. The Ingram one's interesting. I would be a little concerned long-term with the fit there with him, with Johnson, Reese, Hunter, and Daniels. It feels like there's a lot of similarities there. I mean, he's a good shooter. He can score, but I'm just not sure if he quite fits the timeline for these other guys. So that one would be interesting.
I kind wonder if they look at that as like a rental.
Yeah.
Just to, get it expires after this year. The whole reason the Pelicans don't want to are looking to trade him is because he's expecting something close to the max that he can get, and the Pelicans aren't interested in that. I don't think any team is really going to be interested in that. So we'll see how that goes for him. But I kind of wonder if like the Pelicans don't have to give up a ton because of the contract situation. And if they could send back enough expiring money to New Orleans, which is something that they're looking for, if Atlanta considers Ingram as like a rental, like a pseudo, now I think Johnson is better, but if they kind of look at him as like a store brand Johnson for the remainder of this season, and then you get the actual one back next year, and then maybe you try to sign and trade Ingram in the offseason. I like that approach. I could see it.
I definitely think the Hawks don't want to miss the playoffs for Trey, because Trey might also be at that point at the end of this season. If they miss completely even the play-in, there's a chance I think that Trey could be like, all right, I also want to sort of look around here. So we'll see. But man, it's going to be tough to lose Bogey here. He's been great. He's great. One of my favorite guys to cover. I've spoken to him a lot. But I also understand, like, this is the way it goes. This is a business. And he's 32. Daniels, Reese, Johnson, Young, they're all, at a different timeline for him, and he wants to go to a situation where he potentially could win. I think he'd be actually decent in Miami too. I think they could use him down there, because again, FIBA bogey. If you can unlock FIBA
I was
bogey,
just going to say,
well,
we just saw from him in the Olympics over the summer. Give me that guy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think ironically that Olympic run is probably what's he had carried a bit of a hangover into this season because he just has not been healthy enough. And it's funny, man, watching that shot because he's not taking bad shots. He's not taking shots that he can't hit. But when you can't, when the ball's not dropping for you, man, it's just, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's all ramping up. It's just usually what happens is that one domino falls, and then all of a sudden, 2:55 on Thursday, it'll be like there'll be 15 trades going through there.
Good Lord tweet.
Yeah. Maybe we do a late a 3:00 deadline one on Thursday.
That'd be fun.
If some big news breaks.
It sounds to me like you're talking about the dominoes that need to fall. De'Aaron Fox, that situation needs to be sussed out. Jimmy Butler needs to be traded. And then from there, because I know, like, I've spoken to a bunch of people, and basically they're all looking at all of their assets. And it's like, look, if we can benefit either getting Jimmy Butler or benefit from somebody getting Jimmy Butler, that's what we're kind of focused on right now. And then you have the Fox thing. And then after that, after those two deals are kind of figured out, it sounds like that's going to be kind of, those are the two logs that once they move, the dam breaks.
Yeah. I mean, the new CBA as well, with all the aprons. I mean, I don't fully understand how it all works. And, it seems so complicated to me. But that's also, from what I'm hearing, people, teams are kind of like somewhat nervous about, taking on more money and what that's going to mean with the repeater tax issues and things like that. So, that's coming into play. But definitely, I think, the Suns making that deal to get 3 first-round picks in exchange for 1 is them. They're like, we need to add some sweeteners in there to try to get a deal done. Yeah. Because the Heat, I'm sure, will say, listen, we'll take Bradley Beal, but you got to give us a pick as well. They're pretty. That's the sort of way Pat Riley operates. Is he'll like, but the Sun and I think Matt Ishbia has sort of demonstrated like he wants the big splashy move. He's prepared to do it. Pat Riley's like, well, I'll take full advantage of that. Give me all those picks, give me the player, and you can have the guy we didn't want anyway.
Yep.
Okay, the other bit of news that came out, Adam Silver was on a podcast earlier this week, and one of the possible things he said he's a fan of, in fact, is reducing the length of quarters in a game from 12 minutes to 10, citing that the NBA is basically the only league in the world that plays 12-minute quarters. Now, before I ask you your opinion, to me, this sort of is one of those things where it's like, I think everybody feels the best way to improve the quality of the league is to reduce games. But that's the only thing that will not be discussed or even considered at any point. And I understand why, the business side of it. So instead, it's like, all right, we'll find other things that we can maybe sort of slice and dice around here with, one of them being 10-minute quarters. I don't think that's going to happen either. I just don't think that's the way it's going to go. But what do you think? Is there any chance they could adapt these sort of EuroLeague or FIBA 10-minute quarters, which are very, very popular for people to watch, and they do make the games quicker and shorter?
I do truly kind of feel bad for Adam Silver because the solve is right there and they can never, ever use it. Like, could you just imagine you're sitting there in jail and there's a get out of free jail card sitting there in the cell with you, and you're like, and yet like you can't touch it, it would just drive me nuts. But yeah, I don't know. Being a Laker fan, this would, I think, help the Lakers oddly, because that means you have fewer games, fewer minutes that need to be filled over the course of a game, so you can make rosters more top heavy. This would give an advantage to teams that can attract stars, and also like it would make stars' impact on the game that much bigger. The other way you could look at it, though, is that like if everybody is playing that much harder, maybe it scales down that way, I guess. But that would be the thing is, I just don't think it's great for the league that every time we talk about, ways to fix the league or to improve the league or whatever, is less basketball. Like I think the 82 game season is here to stay. It's never going anywhere. This is also, like, in fairness to Silver, he was asked like the wildest ideas that get thrown out there about improving the league, and this was one of them. Now, he said this is he did say this is one that he likes personally, is shaving it down a couple minutes per quarter. I don't know. Fix review, either scrap it or fix it. Cut down the number of TV timeouts, figure out a way for the game to flow at the end of it, so that you don't have 35 minutes devoted to 2 minutes of basketball.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many other ways that, like, if you're concerned about the length of time that you need to keep people's attention, then figure out a way to maintain flow within the game so that 12-minute quarters don't feel so long at the very end of it.
That is the actual solution right there, because we all agree that fewer games, it would be better, but that's not going to happen. So the fixable actual solution for me is one timeout each in the fourth quarter. That's it. Because nothing drives me crazier than, like you mentioned, the last 2 or 3 minutes, it's just like one after the other. And I would also scrap, again, it's not going to happen, but I would scrap, once you've called a timeout, you can't call a timeout without the ball being thrown into play.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when teams are trying to make a pass and they're like, oh, timeout before the 5-second violation, it's like, you just had a timeout. Like, play the goddamn game,
Yeah.
And that to me is what it would be. If you only had one timeout each in the fourth quarter, then it's like, all right, we're not just going to do the break up the momentum play timeout. We're not going to do the old Greg Popovich 15 seconds into the quarter timeout. It's going to be like, man, you have to wait. You might want to use it for the last play. You might want to use it here or there. But just, you can speed up a part of the game, the fourth quarter, that would then, I think, address this issue of like, okay, you keep the 12-minute quarters, reduce the timeouts throughout the first three anyway as well, but make it so that the last quarter is the one that actually goes quicker. So, you don't need to trim the game down by 10-minute quarters. If you're still going to have all these timeouts, that's just going to still have that same problem. So instead, just say, right, from now on, it's like a soccer game. The last 12 minutes, you might see one commercial, maybe two, and that's it. The rest of it, we're going to play this game until the end. And I think that's something they should consider, so you can change, a part of the game without really upsetting any of the older rules or anything like that. Instead, you're just like, let's just get to the end, because that's what people, I think, do find the most frustrating of just the delay and the delay and the delay. And it's like, no, this is what we hate. Let them just play. So we'll see. I don't think the 10-minute quarters is going to happen either. Because like you say, I think Adam Silver's like, he's in a tough spot because the business side of it cannot be impacted. That's basically what it comes down to, the bottom line of how are we going to, is it going to cost us money if we change the game? Yes, we don't want any changes then. And that's what the owners are going to be about. And the TV partners as well. And so it's like, how do I then appease the fans while also keeping the investors happy? And there probably is not a solution that everyone's going to be on board with.
I would seriously consider addressing free throws too. One, they have to be a lot stricter on the amount of time guys take shooting free throws. There's the 10-second rule or whatever. I would actually shave that down. You have like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Get the ball, take your couple dribbles, get into your rhythm. Don't walk all the way to half court when you're getting ready to shoot a free throw. Like, it's not a timeout, it's a free throw. Or if you're going to do that, one thing that I think the league should and the partners should think about is, like, you'll see this in football because football has a lot of downtime. It just doesn't feel like it has as much downtime because there's so many replays of the play that just happened and all that stuff. But like, anytime somebody gets hurt, they immediately shoot to commercials. They pay their bills. As soon as somebody gets hurt, they show some like Pfizer commercial. And I think one thing the league should maybe think about during free throws, if you're not going to tweak the game or whatever like that, do a picture-in-picture commercial, a quick little like, here's AT&T for 10 seconds. Here's Drake from State Farm for a quick second, and then throw back to whatever. That way, you know, and I would use that to essentially pay for whatever timeouts or stoppages in play that you would, you know, I would essentially trade the stoppages at the end of a game for commercials during free throws. And, you know, that way you improve the viewing experience at the end of a game, but you also don't mess with the money. You know, it is going to have to be, you know, because the thing that the league is running into, and the thing that frankly everything in late stage capitalism is running into, is like everybody needs to keep growing their revenue, and they have to keep on growing. And so long as that is the case, you're going to have to make some sacrifices in viewing experience. But I think the NBA is up against it, in that NBA fans, according to the ratings, are sick of making that sacrifice.
Yeah.
So eventually the league is going to have to get a little bit more creative than they have, where like they do this thing at the beginning of, you know, they sell the most expensive commercials at the beginning of games, and they, you know, start times are supposedly at like, you know, 7:30 or whatever Eastern, and the game actually starts at like 7:45. And the reason for that is so that they could run like a you know, a 5 commercial set that is more expensive than any other commercial for the rest of the game. That's when, you know, everybody is tuned in until the end of the game. That like, those are the kinds of things, like, just get a little bit more creative, but don't mess with the sanctity of the actual sport. You know, I thought JJ had a great line yesterday when he was asked about it. He's like, we're the biggest sport. We're the biggest league in the sport. Why are we conforming to what the global sport is doing? What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, like I say, I think there are some workable solutions out there that again would take a little bit of moving from the owners and the you know, the sponsors and the partners. But I think the key is keep that fourth quarter flowing, keep that game moving. You know, so people don't get so frustrated. Well, speaking of 10-minute quarters, we are definitely going to have that today in Belgrade, when it is the derby between Crvena Zvezda and Partizan Belgrade in the EuroLeague, and this is going to be a big one, as that always is. I was there a couple of years ago, man, and this is the one. I think there's some huge derbies in Europe, and I think Istanbul has a couple, in fact, with their teams. And Greece has the big one between Panathinaikos and Olympiakos. But I think this one, Partizan Belgrade and Red Star Belgrade, is the biggest and the most craziest. And it's interesting, it's on a Friday night. It usually used to be on a Thursday, but they've moved it back to a Friday. I know you've seen the clips. I know we've talked about it a lot. But, you know, are you going to try to sort of catch anything of it today? I mean, it's going to be on FanDuel TV, and I think ESPN3 as well. But, you know, what are your thoughts when you see the images coming out of a contest like that?
See, I'm the weirdo who tuned into Korean baseball during COVID. Like, I'm a competitionaholic. Like, I love this stuff. So I literally, you know, as we have been recording, got an assignment from Clutch Points. So I have to knock that out, and then I have to go and take care of some stuff for the weekend. But if I'm while I'm writing, I'll probably have that on. And the thing with this game, though, based on clips that I've seen and everything that you've talked about, sounds like it's going to be kind of difficult for it to be background noise, because it's very noisy. So I'm definitely going to check it out, though, because it's the thing that I really wish, like, there was a clip that went viral over the weekend of a baseball game. I forget the teams or whatever. There was a hitter who was up in the top of the ninth. So he hit a homer, and he threw a bat flip, Leigh, that was in the air for more than 4 seconds.
Wow.
It was a hawk. Like, it was just way up there. And he didn't get thrown at. He didn't, like, it, you know, there was no, like, not like it. There wasn't any, like, nonsense as he was going.
Yeah,
He probably took a good minute to go around the bases. He was stopping and flexing. It was incredible, and the fans were going insane. His bullpen and his dugout were going insane, and I just love that passion that we saw there on display, and in this game too. Now it is a like you said, one of the great rivalries in the sport across the world. So it's not quite apples to apples, but we saw Lakers Celtics the other week. And the atmosphere inside the arena was great. The game itself was great. I loved it because the outcome, in my opinion, was fantastic. but you compare. If I was to put that game side by side with what we're going to see today from this derby, it's incredible. I'm so jealous.
I love the bat flip in baseball. The Jose Bautista one. Cool. I think I can't remember the team it was against now, but Jose Bautista. You probably know the one I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
in Toronto.
One of the coolest ones ever.
Yeah, it was so cool. I know it's kind of one of those things that's somewhat frowned upon, isn't it? It can incite a fight and stuff like that. But it when he smacked that, and the second he smacked it, it wouldn't have even cleared the fence by the time he reacted, was what made it so cool. That's the Steph turn away three. You shoot it, and then you're just you're walking off and celebrating. And I love it. And so I want to see. I'm going to go and check this clip out. I want to see this 4 second.
If I find it, I'll send it to you because 4 seconds of hang time on that.
That's unbelievable, man. That is unbelievable.
They had to zoom out to keep the bat in
it's
sight.
Like Tom Chambers on Mark Jackson in '89. I think he was in the air for 4 seconds. But
exactly.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for this show. We will be back Sunday night around 8 p.m. Eastern to talk a little NBA. Maybe we'll do a little extra podcast if there's a big trade. That goes down. Certainly if there's one not necessarily between these two teams, but involving the Lakers and or the Hawks, if it's big enough and juicy enough, and we'll try to get on there. So as I said before, it's funny going down to games. Like I say, I don't go probing for information, but it just comes your way. And and that's one of the really cool things, that when you hear something and then you see it, and then you're like, or you see it online, you're like, that's bullshit. Yeah, that's probably right. Don't know where that one came from. Okay, I know someone who's been talking to someone, and
I'm a big fan of the move where you have your phone right, you're off to the side, you pretend to be on your phone, and you lean into a conversation between two people who
eavesdropping is great,
but it's professional eavesdropping. It's totally different from the stuff that you do, the rubbernecking you shouldn't be doing.
It's business eavesdropping, and I'm also now at a stage where I'm like, what information have I got versus what do I want to share versus, because I've gotten some decent information that I'm like, I'm not comfortable sharing this, because if that wasn't a conversation where we were talking about that, it was more just like, oh, that's interesting. Interesting. But now I'm like, you know what? I need to maybe poke these a little bit more, these contacts, and see what I can get out of them. But
Leigh bombs.
Yeah, exactly. It would be nice to get one. I've had one in my life, one successful one. That was the Josh Giddey number 6 pick for the Oklahoma City Thunder, 12 hours before I got it, and before it happened. And I landed it. So I'm 100% right now. That's why I'm somewhat reluctant. Like I say, I got something the other day that I was like, I could probably put that out there, but it was sort of somewhat vague-ish as well. But it was like, no, that I can connect those dots, but. Yeah, we'll see.
'Tis the season. Fire the tweet. See what happens. What could go wrong?
All right. Well,
or the Bluey.
On the Bluey. We will see you guys on Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern.